Okay, for our level 1 section of your learning target check, you basically just have two rational expressions you have to simplify. You can see one's got a couple trinomials in it, and the other one's just a couple of monomials. So on the top one, we've got 70 divided by 14. That does come out even. 70 divided by 14 is 5. So since the 70 is the bigger number and it's on top, the 5 will go on top. And then it's as simple as seeing our x's. We've got 9 on bottom and 3 on top. So there's 6 more on the bottom. That means we're going to have 6 left on the bottom. That's all there is to it. It's just 5 over x to the 6th power. On the other one, we've got a trinomial and a trinomial. We need to factor those out. So we want to write them in factored form first. So just working on the top, we're looking for numbers that will multiply to give us 48, but when we add them together, they give us a negative 14. So there's a couple things you can look at here. Since we do have a positive 48 and a negative 14, so we have a negative b value and a positive c value, that means we're working with two negative numbers, because there's only two negative numbers that's going to add up to a negative number, but then also multiply to give us a positive. So if we're looking at it, 48 and 14, if you could try a few different numbers around. For the sake of the video, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you it will be 8 and 6 that you would be looking at. So 48 divided by 8 would be 6. 6 times 8 obviously is 48. And then also if you do negative 6 plus negative 8, you end up getting negative 14. So factored form would be x minus 6 times x minus 8. And then you do the same thing on the bottom. You factor the bottom. Again, we're looking for numbers that multiply to give us negative 40, but add to give us a negative 3 for our b value. So since they add together to give us a negative, but then also multiply to give us a negative, the only way you can multiply to get a negative here is to have one positive, one negative number. So that being said, with our b value coming out negative, that means the bigger number is going to be negative. So whatever the higher value number is, that will be negative. That's the only way that can happen. So we're looking for two numbers that are three numbers apart from each other, because we got a negative 3x. So they're three numbers apart from each other, and then we'll multiply to give us 40. We're looking at 8 and 5. Okay, 8 and 5 is what we're looking for here. Since the negative 3 is involved, that means the higher number, in this case the 8, would be getting the negative. So we'd have x minus 8 times x plus 5. I wrote the x plus 5 first just so you can see that these are going to line up. It doesn't matter if I would have put the x minus 8 over here. Either way, they'd still cancel each other out, which is what our next step is. We would cancel out the x minus 8 from the top and the bottom because we got a match. So those cancel each other out, and we are left with x minus 6 on top divided by x plus 5 on bottom, and that would be your final answer. Okay, for your level 2 problems, you've got one multiply and one divide, and you can see they're kind of the simpler variety. One thing you would want to do first, we'll just work on the top one here. You're just going to put everything together across the top and then everything together across the bottom, and then cancel stuff out. It makes stuff easier, makes it easier to not screw things up. So the only coefficient I have is 5, so I'll just leave that as a 5. Then I have x to the third, doesn't have anything to combine with till it says x to the third. But then in total I have y squared and a y to the 9th power, so I have a total of 11 y's on top. So I'm just going to write y to the 11th power. On bottom, I've only got one coefficient, that's a 7. I have 4 total x's on bottom. I got x and then I got x cubed, so it makes x to the 4th. And then I've got a y squared, and I'll just multiply it over and just bring it in and make y squared. Now I can go ahead and cancel things out. 5 over 7 does not reduce. That just stays 5 on top and 7 on bottom. I have more x's on bottom than on top. I only have one more, so I'll have one left. So just x to the first power, or just x would stay on bottom. And then I have 9 more y's on top than on bottom, so y to the 9th power goes on top. I didn't really need a fraction that long, so I'll erase some of it, and that would be your final answer. That's all there is to it. Now at the bottom, you do the same thing, but you're going to want to flip this fraction and multiply. Since that's a divide, that's the easiest way to do a divide. You just flip this fraction and do a multiply instead. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And I'll just rewrite it below. I have 5x cubed y to the 4th over 10x to the 5th. And then now I'm going to multiply, and I'll have 6y to the 5th over 3x squared. Whenever I multiply that, I'll have 5 times 6 is 30. And then I have x to the 3rd power, y to the 4th power. Actually, not y to the 4th power. I forgot to add the 4 and the 5. So I have y to the 5th and y to the 4th power makes y to the 9th power. And then so happens I have 10 times 3 on this one, and I'll have a 30. And then I have 7 total x's, so x to the 7th, I don't have any y's. Whenever I reduce this, well, that's easy. 30 divided by 30 is just 1. They cancel each other out. You don't have anything now. You just have the x's and y's. I have 4 more x's on bottom than on top, because 7 minus 3 is 4, right? So x to the 4th goes on bottom, and then I have y to the 9th on top, because there are no y's on bottom to cancel with. And so that would be the final answer there. And then, of course, up top, we had that was our final answer. Okay, for this problem, our level 3 problems, we have, we're getting into some binomials on top and bottom. And then also we have stuff that can be factored, like this can be factored. Here, this can be factored. We can take out the greatest common factor of 5 here. So just pay attention when we do these. On top, first thing I got to do is my factor part. I can factor out the x squared minus 36. It's the difference of squares problem. The square root of 36 is 6, so I end up having x plus 6 and x minus 6. That's what x squared minus 36 factors out to. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write the factored form on there. So let's get rid of that. And we'll sub in our x plus 6 times x minus 6. And I don't need this anymore, so let's get rid of it. Now we're just going to put everything together before we cancel anything. I can tell it's going to be easy to cancel, but I like to write it all together. So x minus 6 and x plus 6 on top. Then on bottom we have x minus 2 times x plus 6 times x minus 6. When we get to canceling, okay, I got x minus 6 and an x minus 6. They cancel each other out. I got an x plus 6 and an x plus 6. They cancel each other out. The only thing I'm left with is an x minus 2 on bottom. I don't even really need parentheses there. I got x minus 2 on bottom is all I got. So since everything canceled off the top, I get to put a 1 there. Now, if everything would have canceled off the bottom, technically you still have 1 there, but you wouldn't really write it as a fraction. You just write whatever the numerator is. But when you leave only something on the bottom, don't forget to put a 1 on top and make it a fraction, 1 over x minus 2 in this case. At the bottom, the second problem we have here, we've got a little bit we can do with that and something we can do with that and other different squares. So let's just do a little bit of side math over here. I know that 5x plus 15, well, that's the same as saying 5 times x plus 5. Not 5, x plus 3. Okay, so that's just factoring out the 5. The 5's getting factored out. If I was to distribute the 5 back in, I'd have 5 times x is 5x, and then 5 times 3 makes 15. So I know that 5 is my greatest common factor. I just factored out a 5. That's all I did. My difference of squares, I had x squared minus 9. Square root of 9 is 3. So that is equal to x plus 3 times x minus 3. We've done that so many times, you guys should understand that. What happens is you end up having x squared plus 3x minus 3x. The 3's cancel each other out, or the 3x's cancel each other out, and then you have 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. That's how that works. So I'm just going to rewrite what I have over here. Let me just go ahead and let's write it below because I got to flip that fraction anyway, the second one. So I'm going to have 5 times x plus 3 on top divided by x plus 3 times x minus 3. And I'm going to now flip the fraction and multiply. So I'm going to multiply by, like I said, this second fraction here gets flipped because it's a division. I want to multiply. It's easier that way to just flip the second fraction. So on top I'll have x plus 3. On bottom I have x plus 9. If I multiply straight across, I end up having 5 times x plus 3 times x plus 3. I know I could write x plus 3 squared, but I want it all expanded for my canceling purposes. Then I have x plus 3 times x minus 3 times x plus 9 on the bottom. So when I cancel, the only thing I can cancel off 1 x plus 3 on top and 1 x plus 3 on bottom. I don't have an x plus 3 on bottom to go with the other one. Okay, so even though I had 2 x plus 3's here, only one gets to cancel off. I have to have one to match up on each side when I cancel things. So what happens is I end up with 5 times x plus 3 on top. And on bottom, I'll just leave it as factored form. X minus 3 times x plus 9. Okay. If you were taking an ACT and for some reason they had an expanded form at the bottom and it was a trinomial, all you'd have to do is FOIL this out and it would match up. But we'll just leave it in factored form for our purposes. So this would be your final answer. And of course, up top we had our final answer was 1 over x minus 2. And guys, really with the level 4 and level 5 problems, it's just a lot more of the same. If you can factor your trinomials and make sure you can factor, difference of squares and factor out greatest common factors, as long as you write everything out in factored form, everything's pretty well straightforward. The only difference in the level 4 and level 5 problems are it's expanded to be longer. I don't feel like you really need a video on that. It's just more of the same. It really is. Just take your time on your factoring and everything, and you'll be fine on the quiz.